Have you ever gotten to the end of the day? Maybe you've eaten really well. Maybe you're on track, sticking to a diet, trying to lose weight, and you see a treat in the pantry or the fridge, and you tell yourself, I'm just going to have one serving. I'm going to have one brownie, or I'm just going to have one bowl of popcorn, or whatever it is. But you find yourself 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, having eaten the whole tray, eaten way more than you intended to. After you eat that one, it's like you just feel like you need more and more. Maybe you had a rough day and you're just escaping from the stress of the day. I found myself in this situation time after time, and I was so confused. Like, why can I not just stick to what I said, what I told myself, what I promised myself? That I would just have one, or I would just have two. Why would I always end up eating more, even though I knew how it was going to affect me later and the next day, how I'd feel like crap about myself, how I'd have less energy to be with my family, take care of my kids, work out, my sleep would be ruined. All of these things would just get worse, but still I would find myself stuffing my face at night. And so in this video, I want to share what actually helped me to get out of this cycle. And hopefully you can take this and make these changes so you can fix your eating habits. And so if you've seen any of my videos, it starts by taking a step back and looking at what's really going on here. What's sort of the cycle happening. It might seem obvious, but it's going to be different for every person. So what happens earlier in the day can affect what happens at night, and it usually does. So maybe it's just out of habit. Maybe it doesn't matter what happens earlier in the day and it's just a habit at the end of the day. Or maybe, for myself, if I had a stressful day, a long day, this can make things harder at night. But either way, we have things that happen earlier in the day. We get to the end of the day, maybe we want relief, maybe we want to relax. Maybe it's just a habit we go to eating, and we tell ourselves how much we're going to have because we think that's going to help us stick to it. We know how much we can have. That's not going to cause us to have all these problems later. And so we tell ourselves that, and then immediately after we finish that amount, let's say it's a piece of pizza, then we want more. Our brain tells us, oh, no, you need more, you're hungry. And so we eat more, we eat way too much, and then of course it just goes downhill from there. So before I saw this pattern, I told myself, and I think a lot of people tell themselves, I just need to set better limits for myself. I just need to stick to one. If I can do that, things will be okay. Now, seeing as this has happened hundreds of times, I know that this doesn't work. And why is that? So there's a few reasons. And I think the biggest one is the addictive nature of the food that we're eating. So what happens when we eat food that has never been eaten in the history of humanity? So if we look at sort of the time scale of humanity, it's only in the last several decades that there's been this highly processed food with amounts of sugar that have never been consumed by humans, with density of calories, with the flour that's been stripped and turned into its most addictive form. And so our bodies have not evolved to process this food in a healthy way. So what happens is it spikes our dopamine, makes us feel really good in the moment, and it kind of takes control of our brain. We don't remember our limits, or even if we do, it's overpowered by that desire for feeling good. It's overpowered by the feeling of relief. So what actually happens when it spikes this dopamine, this chemical in our brain, it gets rid of the negative emotions. We don't remember the guilt or the shame we had just felt yesterday when this happened last time. We just hone in, like it's like all we can think about is, we need another one, need another slice. So when we're trying to set limits, we're trying to basically use our willpower to overpower this desire for dopamine in our brain. It's a natural desire. Our body thinks that this food is going to help us survive, basically, because that's what evolutionarily dopamine does for us. It's a signal that helps us know that something is good. But in this case, food has been designed to be addictive, to spike this dopamine sort of unnaturally, and we know that it's going to cause problems. And so we're fighting against our brain. One part thinks it's good, another part we know it's going to cause problems. And so some days we have the willpower to actually stick to our limits. But inevitably, it's not consistent. Some days are harder than others. Some days we've used up a lot of that willpower throughout the day. Taking care of our family, going to work, it's a stressful day, and we just can't restrict ourselves at the end of the day. And so what I realized is I'm using very limited resources, aka my own willpower, to fight against something that has been designed to hijack my brain. And so, you might think that's a bit of an exaggeration, but really, these companies that create this processed food, they think about how to make it as addictive as possible. And so I think looking at food as an addiction can actually be helpful. So I want to explain that a little bit. So if you think about addiction, your mind might think about like someone using alcohol, someone who might have an issue with that. And what do people with alcohol do to recover or help them become sober? One of the most common things is what's called Alcoholics Anonymous. So these are support groups where people come together. There's sort of a program, 12 steps, where people learn to overcome their addiction. And this is just an example of how people with an addiction utilize other resources, other systems outside of themselves. It takes some of that burden off of themselves, puts it on their community, puts it on these steps that's going to help them to become sober in a sustainable way, instead of just relying on their own mind to resist. Okay, so this sort of reframe for myself into, this is an addiction. I need help. I can't just rely on myself. It gave me permission to offload some of that burden. It gave me permission to explore ways to loosen this food's grip on me, instead of just relying on these limits for myself. And so I'll just give you one example of how I started to do this for myself. And there were several different systems and sort of tools I use, but this is just one of them. I noticed if I went straight from work, and I work from home, if I just left my office, went and greeted my wife, maybe she needed support as well, that I would be far more likely to eat a lot of food in a way to sort of decompress. And so from that observation, I realized I need time to decompress before I leave my office. I need a way to center myself. And so I experimented, and one thing I found for myself is just doing a little bit of deep breathing. just taking a few minutes, up to 10 minutes, to do some deep breathing, to talk to myself about what happened with the day, maybe what's on my mind, so that I'm not turning to food to deal with that stress, because ultimately it's not going to deal with it. And so that's just one example, and you can reflect on your life, what's making it harder to stick to your plans for eating. There's a lot of different things that can really help to almost guarantee that we stick to our goals around eating. And one of those is dealing with these emotions, which I just shared. And so if you're needing help figuring out what it is in your situation that's making it so hard to be consistent, then click the link in the description and set up a time to chat with me. I've talked to many people figuring out their situations, what's holding them back, and so I know I can do that for you as well if you're just tired of letting food control you. Otherwise, please subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.